Hello everyone and welcome to Big Rock Moto. Thank you so much for tuning in today. In today's video, I have an instructional video for you. Now, I rarely do these, but I wanted to make an exception in this case. Now, disclaimer, this is not a substitute for reading the owner's manual and figuring out these things on your own or consulting official Honda instructional videos. So today, if you are an owner of an Africa Twin 1100, year 2020 or later, I'm going to show you how to work all the electronic systems on your motorcycle. So I'm going to assume that you have a fully loaded bike with a dual clutch transmission or DCT and with Showa's electronic suspension control. So I'm going to show you how all this stuff works, as well as the basic systems of the bike like the traction control, the ABS, and how the display works and how basically to demystify and how to use this stuff. The Africa Twin has one of the most powerful electronics packages of any modern adventure bike, but it's very daunting and very intimidating at first. So let's jump in and get started. Okay, let's start and orient ourselves to the controls of the Africa Twin. There's a lot going on. Let me start all the way over here. If you have dual clutch, you have a parking brake lever. You have your high beam selector up here. On the top of this switch pod, you have a two-way rocker switch for phone control, and you also have the menu access button. Then you have a two-way switch here for function. We'll show how that works. And then this main switch pod here, you have your favorite button, which I have set up to traction control, but I'll show you how to do that. You have up and down, which will also switch your riding modes. You have a left and right toggle. You have forward and back track buttons. You have an enter button, a back button. In my opinion, these are reversed, so that can be something to get used to. You have a horn button. Down here, you have a turn signal, hazard light button, and then you also have your DCT shift button. So here is the downshift, and the upshift is way up back behind here like this. Once you get used to it, it's not too bad. Moving over to the right switch cluster, you have cruise control, on and off, and then up and down and set, reset. You have the DCT control for neutral, drive, sport, automatic or manual mode, and you have the engine stop, start, kill switch. All right, when you fire up your Africa Twin, you might be greeted with a dashboard that looks like this. Now, you have upper and lower displays on the Africa Twin. The reason for that is when you have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto in the upper display, you still have vital information in the lower display. Plus, it takes a minute for this upper screen to boot up if you're taking off quickly, so you still have this information down here. Now, the first thing that I'm going to recommend you do when you get your Africa Twin is we're going to start by going into the menu, because if you see this dashboard display here, there's a lot of information missing. So if I go to a different riding mode, you see how we have all the information now. So let me show you how to do this. So the way it works is that, let me go in here into the menu. I'm going to go down to settings, hit enter. I'm going to go to function. Nope, that's not right. I'm going to go back to display, hit enter, display mode, enter again. Now you can set up the display mode you want in each user mode. Honda gives you a choice between different levels of information. They call it silver, gold, bronze, things like that. Here's what I recommend. For each of your riding modes, set it to the maximum display level, which is the gold. So I had this set up for an example with that, but you can scroll through here, make sure everything is set to the gold mode. The reason for this is that you can see all of the vital information and control via the touchscreen all of the vital parameters in whatever riding mode you're in. So this is my preferred setup. Okay, I apologize. If I set the camera exposure to expose for the white screen, it doesn't work for the black screen. So a little bit of issue there. I apologize for that. Let me go back. Let's back up a little bit. All right. Let's just go back to the riding information screen. Let me get you oriented to this. So if you're in the screen and you hit the up and down arrows here on your left pod, it's going to go through riding modes. You have off-road, gravel, urban, tour, user 2, and user 1. So what is that? 6 or 7 riding modes? The user modes are configurable and the pre-programmed modes are not. Now, there are 2 things that do not get changed that are not tied to the riding mode. Actually, more than that. There's more like 3 things. There's the Honda HSTC or Honda Selectable Torque Control, otherwise known as traction control. There's the wheelie control, which is part of the traction control system. And then there's this preload on the suspension. We'll talk about that. So those things don't necessarily change when you change riding modes. The things that do change when you change riding modes are your power level, your engine brake level, and when I say power level, it's really throttle response. It doesn't change the horsepower of the bike. Engine brake, and then the gravel mode, we'll talk about that. That's an off-road thing for the DCT. You can program that in the rider modes how you want. ABS is controlled through the rider modes, but you can also do it manually. And then if you have electronic suspension, which I'm assuming you do, by the way, if you don't have electronic suspension or DCT, you can still watch this video, just don't pay attention to the DCT stuff or the electronic suspension stuff. If you have electronic suspension, the damping level of the electronic suspension is tied to the riding mode, but the preload is not. Those are 2 separate things. Preload you set separately. The damping, where it says a suspension O for off-road, so that is controlled by the riding mode, and then in a user mode, you can of course pick what you want. So the first thing is we have a touchscreen display, okay, which is really cool because you have so much here. You can touch to control things. You can also do just about everything via the switch pod if you prefer. All right, so to orient you to the display, in display number 1 here on your left panel, and you can configure the favorites you want in here, but this is how it's going to come set up. You have trip information, fuel consumption, average speed, how much gas you've used on a tank. Screen 2 is trip B, so you've got information for trip B. Screen 3 is like instantaneous fuel consumption, your fuel range, voltage, and the date and time. And then screen 4 is where you can actually really change some stuff. So it's going to show you your ABS setting to the rear wheel, your traction control level, your wheelie control level, the preload that you have set, and whether you have G mode active. So let's back up a second and cover the basics a little bit more just to make sure we get this. There's a lot of parameters within here, okay? The P, this little pie chart for P, power mode, is your throttle response. How sharp do you want the throttle to respond? Less bars lit up means more aggressive, which doesn't make any sense. That's the opposite of what it should be. I don't know why they do that. Because you'd think that if you fill up the chart, that would be more aggressive, but no, if you dial it down, that's a more sharp throttle response. So if you notice, when I go to urban mode, it goes to a softer throttle response. If I go back if I go to gravel mode, it's a really soft throttle response with all the chart lit up there for P. Engine brake is how much engine compression braking you have. It makes a small difference. You can play with that. T is your traction control, or as Honda calls it, Honda Selectable Torque Control. The gravel mode for the DCT changes how fast the clutches in the DCT lock up. ABS mode, and then your suspension damping setting. And then of course you also have, which doesn't show up on here, the wheelie control and the preload. The wheelie control is tied to traction control. It prevents the front end from lifting, but you can adjust it. And then the preload is just what it sounds like, preload for the rear shock depending on how much weight or passengers you're carrying. Okay, let's go back into the menu for a second to show you a couple setup tips, and then we'll talk about the rider modes, how the rider modes work, and how to set your user modes. So to get into our menu, we pull back on this button here, and we pull up our menu. All right, now, if you hit writing information, that just goes back to where you were, right, your dashboard. Hold that again. Go down here, let's go into settings. Now we're not going to cover the phone and media and Android Auto, Apple CarPlay in this video. It's going to have to be a separate video because it's just too much all to do in one video. All right, if we go into display, we already talked about the modes, set everything to gold. Brightness, you can do auto brightness or manual. I recommend auto. The background, okay, so you have to make a choice. You can, the bike is going to come set up in automatic, where it's going to have a white screen with black characters in the day, and then at night it will invert that and it'll be black with white, black screen with white characters. I force it, I turn the auto off and turn it into the black mode I just prefer that for some reason. I just find it easier to read and I just leave it in that setting. Now on favorite information, if we go into there, this allows us to configure that left panel we talked about. You can change what you want to see within, but it gives you, because it gives you 3 screens for that stuff, you really don't need to change it because everything's pretty much already there within those 3 screens. Favorite switch. Okay, this is important. The favorite switch is the star button in the upper left of your left control pod. Most people are going to leave this set to traction control because then on the fly you can hit that favorite button and cycle through your traction control levels. But you could also select it to wheelie control, the riding mode, which you don't need to do because the riding mode controls via the up or down arrows, or you could set your G switch. The G switch is the gravel mode for the dual clutch transmission, which locks up the clutches faster for off-road. All right, we don't really need to do that, and I'll show you why here in a minute. One final thing I haven't mentioned yet is that there is a function button over here on the right-hand side of the switchgear, which you can't see in the camera shot. It's over here behind the start and stop button, and it says function. It's a trigger switch. If you pull that trigger switch, it pulls up something here on the bottom, and it's going to cycle between 2 different things. It's going to cycle between your heated grips if you have the Adventure Sports with the heated grips, or if you have added Honda heated grips to a base model, or your volume control. And once you hit that and that pulls up, it'll leave it there momentarily. Then you can, with your function up and down button here on the left pod, this is where this becomes useful. You can go up and down through whatever you have selected, whether it's your volume or whether it is your heated grips. All right, let's talk about riding modes now and how they basically work. So the way the bike is going to come set up is that the Tour, Urban, Gravel, and Off-Road, Honda has chosen what they think are good combinations of the power, the throttle response, the engine braking, the ABS setting, and the suspension damping. And then preload you have to set. Let's cover that preload right now since we're at it. So you see in screen number 4, you can select your preload. This is the rear shock preload. All right, you can select one rider with luggage, 2 riders, or 2 riders with luggage. So that is, 4 or 5 different settings. So I like to set it to, when I ride by myself, I like a little more preload, so I set it to rider plus luggage. If I just want rider, I just deselect that. You can hear the stepper motor in the preload is lowering the bike just to the lowest rider setting. If I want 2 riders, I simply select the second rider. Now it's going to raise up quite a bit. You can probably see the whole bike moving. It raises it up a lot. So now we're in the 2-rider mode. I'm going to go back to 1 rider plus luggage, which is what I typically ride in. And the preload does not change between the different riding modes. It'll stay the same where you put it, except for the user modes, which you can set the preload that you want, and I'll show you that in a second. All right, now suspension damping, we kind of covered that. The damping of the suspension, which is how fast the suspension moves up and down and how it deals with bumps, is separate from the preload, and that does depend on the rider mode, the mode that you're in. Okay, so we have our pre-programmed rider modes, which are fine, they work well. What a lot of people will do is you're going to use your user modes to configure a lot of stuff. So what can you change in the user modes? Well, let's go into our menu. Let's go to settings. Let's go to function, user modes, and we'll select user 1. So we're going to set up user mode 1. So let's just say for illustration that this is going to be my preferred mode for riding on the road or on the highway. All right, so I'm going to turn my power up to, well, you can use your controls here or you can use a touchscreen. I'm going to turn my power or my throttle response to 2. I kind of like a more progressive throttle response. Again, doesn't change the horsepower, it just changes how the throttle reacts. Engine braking, I like full engine braking at all times. Overall suspension damping, medium sounds good. I can change it to off-road, soft, medium, or hard. The cool thing is Honda gives us front and rear suspension damping as well. So if I feel like the front is a little too soft and compared to the rear, I can firm up the front without messing with the damping on the back. That is a fantastic feature that not even the BMWs and things like that have. Rear suspension damping, I can also adjust that accordingly. ABS, so I'm going to have ABS for user 1 to the on-road setting, which is a sensitive setting. Off-road ABS will be, ABS is still on both wheels, but it's much less intrusive, but it still is active on both wheels. To turn the rear ABS off, you have to do that manually, and I'll show you how to do that. So we're going to, since this is my road mode, I'm going to leave that on road. Now, the cool thing is, if you're a rider of different weights, maybe you're a heavier person, maybe you ate too many cheeseburgers that week like me, or you have really a lot of stuff in your luggage, you can change the preload settings in each of the 4 preload modes, right? So there's 4 preload modes, I guess, not 5 like I said. If you feel like the rider preload is not enough, then you can increase that. So you can say, you know what, I just think that I need more preload. Now, it's not going to change the setting in the normal user modes, just in the normal riding mode, sorry, but it's only going to change it in the user modes. So this is a way for you to customize what you want. All right, so you probably get the picture by now. Now when I go to user mode 1 in my dash, it's going to do the settings that I asked for. User 2, let's say I'm going to set user 2 up for off-road. So I want really gentle power. I want a lot of engine braking. Overall suspension damping, maybe I want hard. I find on this bike that actually the rear is the problem with the soft, so I'm going to turn that up. ABS off-road, I don't need to mess with the preload. So now I'm set up there for how I like to ride off-road in user mode number 2. Okay, go back to riding information. Now when I select user 2, when I select user 2, now it's set up for how I like to ride off-road. There's 2 more things that you can do. Actually, 3 more things you can do in the user modes. You can, if I want to turn ABS off to the rear, I hit cancel, then it brings me a prompt, I hit yes. If you cycle the bike with the key, it's going to reset that, which is super annoying. Traction control we can do with our favorites button there, or press on here. Wheelie control is also something you have to control. For off-roading, I need to turn that off because it interferes too much with the traction control and doesn't allow the traction control to work properly when you're riding in the dirt. Gravel mode, which locks up the DCT clutches, you can set that. So there's still a few things you can mess with outside of just switching into the user mode.
All right, to show you how to use a dual clutch transmission, it helps if we're on the bike and we go for a ride. So when you jump on your Africa Twin DCT, there's a few things that are going to be different. One, you notice that there's no foot shifter. That's going to take some getting used to. The second thing is there's no clutch lever. What you see is this parking brake lever that's way up here. It's designed so that you can't reach. If you reach for the clutch, there's nothing there. The parking brake's really handy. What you do is you pull this lever back and you engage this little lock switch. Now the bike has a parking brake, which helps it from rolling. I use that every time I park. It's really useful. To release it, pull it in, it snaps out. When you key the bike on, it's going to be in neutral. You can see there's neutral here and neutral here. The reason we have 2 screens on an Africa Twin, again, is so that if you have CarPlay or Android Auto going up here, you still have information down here. Now, when the bike, before you start the bike, well, it's going to be in neutral, right? So let's fire the bike up. Okay, so now that the bike is started, the way that you're going to take off with the DCT, so you have a switch over here, right? Up is for neutral, which we're already in. Down puts you into drive. You'll feel the bike clunk just a little bit as the clutch engages. This AM button right here, this is automatic or manual mode. If you're in an automatic mode, there's basically 4 modes. There's a standard drive mode, which is going to shift very conservatively to save gas. Then, if you push it down, you can then select from 3 sport modes right here. To change between sport modes, you hold down that button. So now I'm in sport mode 3, now I'm in sport mode 1, and now I'm back into sport mode 2. The sport modes, what they do is they shift more aggressively and keep you in a higher gear for sportier riding. I like Sport 1 and Sport 2. I mean, I use all the modes depending on how aggressive I want to be. For the 2024 Africa Twin, the drive mode, the standard drive mode is much, much better. It really sucked on the older, on the 2020 to 2023 bikes. Drive mode was almost too clunky. It would shift almost too early. You can try it, but on those bikes, sport mode was pretty necessary. On this one, I can use drive. The 2024 is a lot better. Alright, so with that being said, now you also have manual mode. So if I hit this AM button, you see the D mode selector goes away and it just says 1. So I'm in first gear. Now the way you shift gears manually is you have a downshift here on your thumb and you have an upshift back behind here. Okay? Now, if I try to shift at a stop, it's not going to do anything because it just doesn't work. I mean, you're stopped, right? So it's going to force you to be in first gear. Now, whether I'm in drive or manual, if I want to switch back to drive, all I do is hit the AM again. Now I see I'm back in automatic mode, just like your car, right? All right, so to take off, we're going to just be in drive mode. To take off, all you do is you slowly feed in the throttle, and you can see the bike slowly starts to crawl away. So in normal situations, all you do is just like taking off with a normal transmission, but you're not slipping a clutch, you're slipping a throttle instead. So it's actually very, very easy. And you have exceptional slow speed control once you learn how to use it. Now, one thing that people are concerned about with the DCT is how do I do low speed U-turns and maneuvers? Actually, it works extremely well once you learn the technique, and this will take some learning. Now, what you do is, and because you don't have a clutch to like kind of modulate your speed, you're going to use your rear brake, your rear foot brake, okay? So let's say I want to do a U-turn around these weeds over here. So you notice I'm pushing down my rear brake just very gently and modulating the pressure to control my speed, as well as slowly feeding in the throttle. So sometimes I can do it without even the rear brake, but I always have my foot on the rear brake if I need to slow down a little bit. So see, I can do very nice low speed maneuvers by just gently applying the throttle, and if I need to kind of modulate my speed, I can drag my rear brake a little bit. If you want to use more throttle, you just drag the rear brake harder against it. That can make it feel a little more stable. So you have to experiment and play with this yourself. But doing low speed is actually very, very nice because you're not worried about modulating a clutch and stalling. You can't stall. So you notice you can't stall this bike. That's one of the huge advantages, because with the manual transmission, often people stall and then they kind of get, it's like jerky and then they fall over, right? It doesn't happen with DCT. So that's kind of how to do your low speed maneuvers. Practice your rear brake and your throttle in and out, okay? All right, besides the sport modes and the automatic manual mode, there's one other control you have to change how the DCT works. You have something called G mode, or I guess it's called gravel mode. Not the G spot, that's something different. Now, all right, so in G mode here it says cancel, so it's turned off. So you've got to go into screen 4 here on your dash to do this. And basically what G mode does, if you engage G mode, it locks up the DCT clutches quicker. So it's a more direct drive instead of that softer initial feel, that more slow fade in of the power. It spools up the power quicker and locks up those clutches faster. So if you're really aggressive, like off-road, you want to do a lot of power slides, you don't want that clutch kind of slipping the power, you can put G mode on. To put it on, you just say active, and then it's going to say G mode active right here. All right, I believe you can also program that in with your rider, with your user modes, I believe. So I don't typically find that I really need it. You can play with it and see if you like it. Experiment and see if it works for you. I typically don't find that I really end up using it, honestly, on these bikes. Okay, taking off onto the highway. I'm in drive mode, you see? You can accelerate as fast or slow as you want, and you get a very smooth shifting out of the dual clutch transmission, all right? Let me turn on my cruise control here. Put that up. Now, so when you're in drive mode, everything's happening automatically. If you need to pass traffic, you need to accelerate very quickly. If you fully open the throttle, see how it downshifted into fourth? It always tells you what gear you're in. Now the difference, so let's go into manual mode. Okay, so now you can switch to manual mode anytime. The D goes away. Now I've told the bike I want to be in fourth gear. Now I'm in third gear. Now I'm in second gear. So what happens is, this bike's pretty fast. So in manual mode, you shift the gears yourself. Now it won't let you be in a gear that's completely wrong. It's not going to let you blow up the engine with too high of RPM. It's also not going to let you stall. But you do have manual control of the gears. So if you're riding off-road, if you're riding on the twisties, and you want to pretend you have a manual transmission, you still do have effectively a manual transmission, except it shifts way faster and way easier and smoother than a manual does, because there's no clutch to worry about. so I can shift through the gears just fine. Now let's go back to drive mode. Now, okay, I switched to sport mode. Now in sport mode, what it does is it just holds the gears longer. It runs you at a higher RPM. Also, you notice when I open the throttle like that, it tends to be more aggressive and more immediate with the downshifting, and it's going to hold me in those lower gears longer to give me stronger acceleration. Now, another thing is, if you're in the automatic modes, either drive or sport, you can override the gear. Let's say I need to make a quick pass, but I don't want to go to manual mode. All I do is click my button down to third or fourth. Now I'm in a lower gear. Now what it's going to do, since it's in drive in an automatic mode, after maybe 5 seconds or 10 seconds, it's going to be like, okay, we've given him his lower gear, he's not doing anything, now it's going to upshift you back to the top gear. Alright, so you can override it momentarily, but if you want that full manual control where you don't want the computer shifting for you, then you need to use the manual mode. Alright, now you notice when I pulled into this gas station, I'm in drive, it's seamlessly downshifted to first, and now I can pull into the gas pump here because I'm almost out of gas, and it's just a stress-free riding experience because I'm not dealing with the clutch. Just makes life easy.
Alright, so a little off-road instruction with the DCT. So you have to experiment to see what's best for you. I like Sport 1 or Sport 2 when I'm off-road. It just seems to hold the gears how I want. But sometimes I use the manual mode if I really want to be in more control. But I find this bike does a phenomenal job of putting me in a pretty good gear most of the time. Now, what a lot of people don't understand how to use on this bike is the wheelie control, traction control. The wheelie control is tied to the traction control, and if you don't turn the wheelie control off in the dirt, you don't get the full benefit of this slide control system. So you have a 7-level traction control setup here. But to make it work right, you have to hold down this and turn your wheelie control to 0, because if you leave wheelie control on, what I found is that it interferes too much with the traction control, and even though you turn your traction control like to 1 or 2 bars, which should allow a lot of slip and slide to look like a hero, like cheater mode, it doesn't let you do it properly if you have that wheelie control on, because it intervenes. It feels the front lifting, and the off-road just compounds that. So turn the wheelie control off when you're in the dirt, and then start with traction control like number 4. Well, I mean, I can show you how it works. So if I do full traction control, here's what's going to happen. So, I mean, it actually still accelerates pretty well, even in full traction control. But you notice how it's intervening. Now, if I turn it down to 4 bars, it lets me slip and slide a lot more. Now, if you really want to get rowdy, start doing 3, 2, 1 and play with that. So in bar number 1, oh, see right there, I'd rather be in first gear, so I need to see. Woo! Whoa! Big slide. So yeah, traction control number 1 with the wheelie control off. You can do some pretty big slides. But the nice thing about having that traction control safety net there is it's not going to let you get too insane. I mean, you'll still crash. It's not a band-aid for stupidity or bad riding, but it's a safety net there that I really like. It's also really helpful in steep hills and things where there's a tendency for the bike to just spin and slip out, and the traction control could really help you with that.
A huge advantage of the electronic suspension is when I want to have a soft, floaty Cadillac ride, I can do that. I can use the pre-programmed modes, like the urban mode or the gravel mode if I want really soft, which are pre-programmed, or I can set up my user modes how I want with firmer or stiffer damping. So like right now, with the soft suspension damping, the ride is just really floaty and cushy. But then if I go into tour mode, immediately the electronic suspension firms up and I start to feel all the little bumps in the road. But if I want to ride aggressively and fast, I have that better suspension damping and that firmer, sportier feel. So it's like having 2 or 3 suspension setups in one bike. It's like, you know, going to your suspension tuner to set up your bike, but now you can do it by clicking a button depending on where you're riding and if you want a soft or a firm ride. So I really like electronic suspension, if you can't tell. I think it's a huge benefit on an adventure bike.
I'm tired. That was a lot of information. This is a difficult video for me to make because I'm trying to balance giving you all the information without making it too long and repeating myself. So if there's things you're still confused about, if there are things I missed, please put a comment down below and I'll do my best to get back to you within a few days. I'm sorry we couldn't cover the Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. Basically, you plug your phone into the USB port and you install the the app on your phone, and you have to connect it to a headset. You do need a headset for it to work. Some people have gotten it to work without a headset, but that's kind of iffy. And then you can have apps and things up on your screen, navigation, music, whatever you want to do. And you can pair it, of course, to your Senna or your Cardo, whatever it is you use. Really nice to have. It can disconnect randomly, which is an issue, you know, for most people, including myself when I've owned these bikes. I wish they would make it wireless. That would be, Honda, if you're listening, please make wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto. That would be a game changer, really nice, because I don't want to have to plug in my phone every single time. But anyway, in terms of how to use the bike, I hope this was useful. The Africa Twin is incredibly capable and has an amazing electronics package with it. Learn how to use it to be your best friend instead of your enemy. It really can be your best friend, and it's very useful, very powerful. So take advantage of it. You paid for it. I hope this helps you understand how to use it. Please ride safe out there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you out there.